Tim, thanks so much for joining today in this edition of our conversation series, The Business of People. I'm particularly excited to talk with you because you've had such a long and experienced career in the space of HR and sales, two industries that are evolving so rapidly in our current climate. So I'm really excited for your perspective and thoughts on how this current crisis is going to help both of those spaces really innovate. So I'm going to hand it over to you for a brief introduction of who you are and what organization you're with, and then we'll dive into the meat of our conversation.
Sure, thanks for having me. My name is Tim Finney. I'm the Vice President of HR for Innovative Concepts. It's a manufacturer in Clarence, New York. We make video and redemption games for companies such as Chuck E. Cheese, Dave & Buster's, The Rec Room, and a variety of distributors around the world. We've been in business for over 30 years. We make over 60 games. New game behind me is Monopoly. And it's a fun game. I thought it'd be a nice backdrop for today's conversation.
You indeed win the award for coolest backdrop so far. I actually ventured into our offices at Select One, which I know you visited often, for the first time in months, just so I could have a more normal background. But you outdid me on the brick wall. But that's very cool. It adds a good context to the conversation. But as I alluded to in the very brief intro, and I know you have known John Baldo, our partner here, for years, and you've spent the majority of your career in the space of HR and talent acquisition. So I am so curious for your perspective and kind of thoughts on how this crisis, and I don't want to spend a lot of time kind of looking backwards and focusing on everything that's going on in the immediate, but how do you think that this crisis is really going to force HR leaders, talent acquisition leaders to innovate and to think differently as we look towards the future?
Well, I think this is the best time for that. I think HR has never been in the spotlight more so than they've had an opportunity to now, whether it's because of the COVID crisis when it comes to, the engineering controls, the administrative controls, unfortunately, any furloughing that we had to do, PPEs, policy, new federal, new state mandates and legislation. It's really put HR folks in the spotlight. And there's an opportunity to create new culture. There's also an opportunity for people in human resources to reinvent themselves. You get an opportunity to reinvent yourself because cultures are changing. We know that we're experiencing a tremendous amount of remote workers. We have that here. Most of our engineers and customer service parts folks have all been outfitted in their homes to be able to provide their services towards us from a remote standpoint. So that created a lot of opportunities to come up with remote handbooks, remote policies, speaking about ergonomics differently and workers' comp differently. Obviously, the families first has helped that. So HR professionals have always had a lot to do, but we have a lot to do now under this new norm that you've heard about. I think as far as talent acquisition goes, quite a bit different than where we were in February. The average for fourth quarter and the first quarter, we were about 3.5% unemployment rate. Quite different now. We're 14.5%, I think it was yesterday, as a nation. There's going to be a lot of talent to choose from, and that's drastically different. Now, the good thing for talent acquisition organizations such as yours is it's always and still takes a ton of time to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not a core function for businesses. So for companies such as myself, that takes us a lot of time to do. So I think talent acquisition companies, I hope, are, for lack of a better word, excited about the opportunity to have more talent and to screen that talent, which takes a tremendous amount of time.
Sure. Yeah, I can say we've been on a roller coaster of emotions here at Select One, trying to navigate the market, as every company has throughout the evolution of this crisis. But I think you touched on an important point that I've been thinking a lot about, and we've been talking to our clients about, that it's still going to be an enormous undertaking to weed through now what is a ton of available talent. But quite honestly, those that are in high demand, those A players, the talent that a lot of organizations that we work with that are seeking aren't the ones necessarily that maybe have been laid off yet. So it's still going to take a very concerted and deliberate effort from a talent acquisition, working with hiring managers and companies to keep the process moving, understand what sets a company apart, to even more so now, draw a candidate that's gainfully employed to another company. So I do hope that there is still perceived value in working with recruitment firms, but more importantly, understanding how important employee, engagement is, employer branding is, in the talent acquisition world, because those key concepts haven't changed, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. Like you said, there's going to be a tremendous amount of applicants now that unfortunately they're forced to look. But think about the folks that are in leadership roles, are in management, upper management roles, where they're concerned that their company may not survive, and that may cause them to start casting the net out and taking a look. So new for everyone, obviously, but I think it presents some great opportunities for your industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Now talk to me a little bit, Tim. I know you've also been in previous positions actively involved in the exercise of sales, so acquiring new customers and clients. And I was really interested to get your perspective, because there's been a lot of conversation about what is an appropriate sales strategy right now. How do you be conscious and timely and appropriate in reaching out, but also cognizant that sales still need to happen? So I'd really value your perspective. John's always talked about what a great salesperson you are. So I wonder your approach and wonder your thoughts on how to effectively navigate the world of sales right now.
Yeah, for me, it never really changed much from the beginning of my career to selling full-time HR services, as well as temporary staffing solutions and permanent placement solutions, to being a HR practitioner from a strategy design standpoint, organizational development standpoint. There's still some fundamentals that I think people need to focus on. Number one, you got to be talking to the right person. You have to be talking to C-suite. You have to be talking to decision makers. I've always thought anyone else, it's a waste of time, unless you're delegated to speak to somebody from the C-suite and they want you to speak to somebody. Mm-hmm. So in my previous role, when I was selling businesses on the concept of hiring HR from a third-party standpoint, I needed to be speaking to CFOs, COOs, CEOs, and owners, or boards of directors in the nonprofit world. It's the same here at ICE. I report to 2 presidents. I need to speak with them because I know that's where the buck stops. That's truly where decision-making is. Mm-hmm. After that, when you get their attention and you're with them, it's really only about 2 things. People complicate things. It's about expertise and efficiency. That's what leaders want to buy. So if someone is going to be buying from you, they want you to know that you're an expert and you can do it better, faster, and more affordable than they can. And then the third component of that is return on investment. You have to be able to return the investment that they're making for your product or your service. It's all still the same. And I think back of the 20 years that I was selling and what I do now, it's the same. I have 2 presidents. We meet weekly. We have a scorecard of goals and deliverables. I prove to them that I'm an expert. I can deliver these services more efficiently than they can on their own, allowing them to focus on their core business and allowing me to show them the return on the investment. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, I'm very fortunate because we meet weekly on that. Mm-hmm. Weekly. That's a meeting that never does not happen. There's always an agenda, and I always have 2 of them. So I think that for sales professionals, no matter what the industry is, those core fundamentals are still the same. Now, you still have to sprinkle in diagnostic selling and aggressive listening. You're very lucky if you can get 30 minutes. I think you should be able to bring your sales pitch, if you will, down to 15. You have to show that what I mentioned, plus you have to do some diagnostics and be an aggressive listener. They just don't have the time to take to listen to sales pitches. So as concise as you can get once you get access to that C-suite, show them you're an expert, show them you're efficient, do your diagnostics to make sure that you're not wasting their time and that they're a good fit for you and you're a good fit for them, and then be a good listener, and then you can follow up with a proposal. And I think that's the same if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, certainly if you're a physician or you're in health services. Everything I just said a physician does with you. Everything.
Yeah. I love that terminology, that phrase diagnostic, because that's so true. We talk about the needs analysis and that discovery phase and making sure that you're asking the right questions with intention that provide value to both parties. And, and that's a really good way of thinking about it that I hadn't before. And something I'll take back to.
No, absolutely. And when you talked about transition earlier, when people transition, Of course, it is possible. Now, if you're an engineer and you want to transition to nursing, there's a lot of academics that you have to go through. There's certainly going to be a gap in your employment while you try to obtain this new industry. It's certainly attainable, but you have to look at the resources available, who can support you, and how passionate are you about pursuing that goal. So I think that as candidates try to transition, or they're looking, like, for example, like I did, I really treated my interview here at ICE like a sales call. I needed to make sure I wasn't wasting their time, and I followed what I just mentioned to you, and made sure that I was listening to them and doing my diagnostics, or I was wasting their time and I was wasting my time.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I've heard so many stories, and I've read, this is the time that I want to pivot my career, transition from this industry to another industry. How do I go about doing that? And that's a good way of framing it too, for those that are in sales, or maybe not, but have been around sales, really approaching transition through a similar lens, making sure that not only are you a fit for the company, but is the company a good fit for you, to ensure that there's mutual benefit.
Right.
That's because I think a lot of people right now are probably saying, maybe this is a good time to transition. And it could be, as long as you frame it in the right way and approach it.
Yeah, you need to do your research. You need to discover what's needed to obtain that new position. If it's a really big switch, and you're going from one profession to another profession, and you need to decide if you can commit to that, and you really have to be passionate about it. All those things need to happen. The research, who's going to support you, how much gap are you going to have, if any, and can you really commit to it, and do you have the passion to move forward? That's been my experience when I went back late in life 5 years ago to get my master's in organizational development and leadership, the things that ironically this organization that employs me now wanted. But I had to have a support system. I had to have an employer that supported that, and they did. I had to have a family that supported that. I had to make certain sacrifices, certain boards that I was on, certain teams that I was coaching. I really had to commit. I had to be realistic as to what was available to me as far as resources, who I was working with, and what I was trying to accomplish in order for that transition to be most effective. And for me, I think taking that really hard look, it really panned out in my particular case, but I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of people help me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that perspective too, again, because I've been reading a lot in preparation for another panel discussion I'm sitting on, just about how to maybe transition and career resiliency. It starts with reflection and making sure that you do some really deep self-discovery to understand where you are, what motivates you, who you are, how you best craft that pitch, and make sure it aligns with where you're going. And that's really good perspective for someone that was able to pivot slightly and invest in something later in their career, because many people are likely in that same boat. So one of the things I just wanted to ask about and follow up that you had alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, Tim, was about culture and maintenance of that culture, or maybe shifting of internal cultures, because I think that's a huge point of consideration or discussion for many HR leaders who are trying to figure out, how do we transfer culture? How do we maintain culture when we're spread out and can't hop around the water cooler? So what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm quite curious about, I genuinely am curious about where the idea of culture is going as we look towards the future.
Yeah, in our particular case, management by walking around, so to speak, that's a little bit harder now because we have about 30% of our workforce at home. So we have a culture at home with this remote workforce. So that required some administrative controls I had to implement, but we're also doing fun things with them, such as, the dress codes are different. And we've had scavenger hunts in their houses where their kids are participating and they're working while they're doing that. We can't control someone's square footage. We can't control that they're homeschooling their kids right now. We can't control, we can control some of the technology. We can provide them with that, but they're now on an island, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So in order to bring that back into a fun culture, which we obviously have here, we have to bring that electronically, through systems for them. So last week we actually had a scavenger hunt at home. and we encouraged our employees to have all their children participate. Some people had their pets there, some people had their spouses there, so their significant others there, and we had a lot of fun doing that. The culture here has changed because it's a pandemic, and there really isn't anything written down in the history books for that because the last one was so long ago. But we're really being empathetic and listening to people's needs. I have a lot of private one-on-one discussions with people that are concerned, obviously, about COVID and what we can do to help, and sharing with them some of the various federal and state laws that they can discover and take part in and take some of the benefits in. So I think what hasn't changed is the empathy that our company has for its employees. They've been very loyal. We have a very tenured workforce. That's what I can say about our organization. Is the biggest part was the remote workforce part. The part that we have here, we're still able to kind of carry through. You know, we've got all the PPEs and the safety precautions and all the Department of Health, guidance and so forth. But it's an opportunity. I think it's a real opportunity for business leaders and HR professionals to, if they haven't looked at culture, they were forced to look at culture now, because it has changed. The workforce has changed for most companies, especially ones that are in phase 1 to phase 4. They most likely are going to be a lot smaller than they were before, and they're going to be implementing technology in ways that they've never did before. So I hope that answers your question. For us, it was, 30% of our workforce is remote now, so we needed to make sure that we could replicate a fun family type atmosphere in the home legally with the same culture that we still have here, at our primary location.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And for a gaming company, that must have been even ever more important, continuing the culture of like what your organization represents and fun and the essence of that.
Yeah.
So, that's something that I know a lot of people have asked us about, and I continue to think about, of that maintenance of connectivity and accountability and
right.
Engagement from
absolutely.
So no, this was good. And I want to end on that note. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but again, Tim, I thank you so much for joining and answering some questions, and particularly offering your perspective as you toggle between HR and sales throughout a long and successful career. So many thanks again. And
you're very welcome. Thank you for you and John and Select One for always supporting me in my career as you have done. I really appreciate that. So
absolutely,
don't hesitate to call.
Absolutely. And best of luck as you forge forward.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim.